maybe my experience and my background, I think, gave the Bush Foundation a sense of that they were rightly situated too, that they were choosing the right people to work with if it did anything.
It set their mind at ease, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It seems like a big hang up for a lot of clients is the fear that they won't be understood or they'll be misrepresented by their agency. So I think that eased a lot of those fears right off the bat. This episode of The Deep Dark is actually a little bit different. It's just going to be 3 of our team members here from Fidelis recapping a recent project of ours, Daisy's Table, that we completed and we all really loved. So stick around, hear how that was for us.
Okay, great. So we are today discussing a project that just wrapped this past month called Daisy's Table. Yes, and we have our COO here with us today. This is Dr. Thaddeus Romansky.
Howdy.
Howdy. Thrilling intro there. And Hannah Clausen, who is our brand specialist.
That's me.
Brand maven, brand guru. So thank you for being on today.
Yeah, this is the first podcast I've ever been on in my entire life. So
Entire life.
be patient with me, people.
Okay, you're killing it already.
Great, thanks.
So when we talk about this project, the first thing that is worth mentioning is that it came to us through these really strange avenues, and we happened to be really well situated specifically for this project because of Dr. Romansky and his ties to Texas A&M and the former President Bush and the library and the whole thing. So we're going to dig into that first.
Yeah. The amazing thing about this project and it coming into Fidelis is that when it came through, it sort of gave purpose and meaning and confirmation to past avenues of work in my life. So I had got my PhD in history from Texas A&M, and while I was doing that and for a short time after that, I was involved in helping produce the 2015 biography of President Bush, Destiny and Power by John Meacham. I was the lead researcher at the in the archives at the Bush Presidential Library.
Yeah, I was going to say, I knew that the archives entered into that.
Yes. So I did that for about 2.5 years, going through all the textual archives that were produced during his 1989 to 1993 one-term presidency.
Yeah, which was very helpful when we started to look at actual objects, the material culture of that time, and how we were going to be able to use those artifacts in the installation.
And then I got a chance to also help with the editing and proofing of President Bush's audio diary that he kept during his presidency, and it's going to be. The plan is for it eventually to be published and made available to researchers. So he kept a daily audio diary during his term.
Wow.
And
so
so then
his voice well.
yes, and then so then to be here in this seat at a creative agency and a project
Like that walks in the door.
like that walks in the door was definitely a feeling of serendipity and feeling like, hey, I'm in the right place at the right time. This is pretty awesome.
No doubt about that.
And it just got better from there.
Yeah. And so really, Maddie at the foundation, right, is the one who was talking with...
Madison Hillen,
That's
their
right.
COO.
That's right. Madison was talking to Andrew Kilzer at Texas Filmworks, and that's how our name came up. That's how the introduction was made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. And Andrew's a close friend of the shop, right?
Boy, I think so. Okay, so that's how they found us, and
We should also talk about setting the biography on the table in that first meeting.
Oh, I wasn't in that meeting.
So the very first sales meeting, our chief revenue officer, Chris Lyon, he asked me to sit in on the sales meeting and just be there to answer questions about what we could do, what our capabilities were, how quickly we could move, because it was a project that had some urgency behind it, and as we'll probably come back to a couple times. but I think maybe my experience and my background, I think, gave the Bush Foundation a sense of that they were rightly situated too, that they were choosing the right people to work with if it
Definitely.
did
Sure.
anything.
It set their mind at ease, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
seems like a big hang up for a lot of clients is the fear that they won't be understood or they'll be misrepresented by their agency. So I think that eased a lot of those fears right off the bat
Yes.
to our advantage.
Yeah. And especially such a revered personality set as we were, trying to honor. And that really was the critical through line through the project was really handling the project with honor to be able to spotlight and then make more available to the public a sense of the interior world of not just the White House, but who the Bushes were as people, a round table. And we're going to get into that in a minute. But that was a driving thought, was that they needed to be well known, deeply known.
Yeah, we kept the legacy of President and Mrs. Bush front and center in our mind, in all of our meetings and all the decisions that we were making. That yes, this was named for Daisy White, who we'll talk about in a second, but it was very much a part of moving forward into maybe a different space or putting in front of a different population, the legacy of President and Mrs. Bush
So
and who they were.
for context, our listeners need to understand we're talking about a cafe. We're talking about a place where you eat food. And that cafe is situated in a gigantic exhibition hall that is right off the wing of the George Bush Presidential Library on the campus of Texas A&M University. And so this exhibition hall, if you can picture this, is a mammoth structure, very, very large building. So large, in fact, that there is a train engine inside the building. And that train engine is...
4141 locomotive.
That's right. So it's this amazing thing to open a door and be like, oh, yeah, all right, here's a train engine.
And just for some added context on the locomotive, it's the locomotive that carried the funeral cortege of President George H.W. Bush's body through College Station.
That's right.
And on the way to his burial site.
I should mention, too, that's why we have Dr. Romansky here, is so that he can use words like cortege. I don't know that I wouldn't hit that. Yes.
I may have misused it.
Okay. Now there's a question mark. Yeah, you have this train engine, and then if your eyes go beyond that, you see Marine One helicopter. So in this interior air-conditioned space with super high-tech glass that helps stop the agonizing Texas sun on the western wall, you have a train engine and a helicopter in a building. And then somebody said, and we should have a cafe here next to it, but that space can feel museum-like. I always describe the space as feeling like a hospital cafeteria, because it was cold, hard surfaces, and yet we had a job to do, which was there needs to be a cafe here. So then the next question is it needs to be named something. That's when we get into the White story.
Yeah, and also for some added background, the Bush Presidential Library was, I think, completed in 1997, I want to say.
That sounds right.
And that was really still before cafes were ubiquitous at museums and such like that. And so this was a little bit of an attempt by the Bush Foundation to kind of retrofit the museum with something that's become really expected by guests when they visit museums and the like around the country.
Yeah. That's great. And also there's like a captive audience there. There's people who have spent hours now at a library or at the museum and then decide I do want lunch or a refreshing drink, and I want to be able to spend time with my friends. So it was a natural decision. Okay, so Daisy White.
Yeah, so in the sales meeting, we learned that one of the non-negotiables on the project was the name of the cafe, that it was going to be named Daisy's in some way or form. And it was named after a woman, Daisy White, who is has become a fixture in the Bush Foundation, has become a very important part of what they do and who they are. And she is a woman who has some 40 years of fundraising, development experience, event planning. I brushed up on this, things like presidential inaugural events, Super Bowl, Major League Baseball World Series. She planned the George Bush at 80 celebration event, did the George Bush at 100 that just concluded in June. And she's a College Station native, so she's rooted here.
Yes. And she's kind of bigger than life. Like the way that she's known and the reverence that's shown to her, like it's big. She's and she's so warm and
a lovely, lovely person.
Yeah, such a great conversationalist, easy to work with. So we lucked out on that. When
We
she
did.
walked into the doors, it was like
Primo.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so we know it's going to be called Daisy's Cafe or Daisy's Table. We know that Daisy White was
Right, Daisy's Table came a little bit later in the process. Originally, it was going to be
It was going to be Daisy's.
Daisy's.
Daisy's or Daisy's
Daisy's
Cafe.
Cafe.
Yeah, but we eventually got to Daisy's Table, and then they go through brand discovery workshop. We're getting stories. We're getting just sort of a glimpse as to what it might have been like to share a table with the president and Barbara Bush, and what.
And can you guys kind of talk about what is the brand workshop? What is that kind of product that clients are getting when they walk in the door? But we don't want to give away, don't want to give all our secrets away.
You can go ahead, Hannah, on your first podcast. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, the purpose of a brand workshop is to get client teams aligned with our internal team and kind of establish those main foundational pieces of your brand so that everything that we do following that, whether that's marketing or design or literally anything else, we are an integrated marketing agency, that it will all be cohesive, it'll speak to the right people, it'll look right and sound great so that it can drive revenue at the end of the day. That's what we want for the brands that we work with. So there are a lot of questions that we ask. We really dive deep and tell people to get on their soapboxes and let the tears flow and just tell us everything about what their brand should stand for. And so for this project in particular, of course, when we first heard about it, we were all like, who is Daisy? And we
Right.
knew that that's going to be the first question that comes into everyone's mind whenever we move this direction with this brand. So we had to figure out a way to explain that in a way that made sense in cohesion with also the Bush legacy, and make sure we're speaking to the right people and make sure we're looking and sounding the way that everyone is maybe not expecting to, but the way that everyone wants to be spoken to and how they want to be appealed to. So
Yeah, and the
it really
brand
revealed a lot.
the brand development is so necessary for everything that follows on the backside. So anybody can snag a quick logo, anybody can throw up a Wix website, and you're off to the races. The problem is that there's no story, there's not anything for people to fall in love with. And we're coming in on 100 workshops by this point. And you are going to experience all kinds of things in those because it's so collaborative that we're actually trying to excavate stories and the deepest parts about what makes the enterprise special or important or what value it actually produces in the earth. And so, yeah, you do get people crying. We were in one yesterday where people were crying. We get... it's just, they're a lot of fun. They take the better part of a day and you're kind of wrung out at the end of it, but you got to all of the really important stuff.
And we do buy you lunch.
Well,
right.
That's right. Throw that in. And then you've got these nuts and bolts of how we can really build a brand from there.
I think what was great about kind of where we finally landed with this was we knew we had also a kind of a pre-existing brand of the George and Barbara Bush Foundation. So we had to be sensitive to that brand's heartbeat and values. And Daisy's Table really became this Daisy's kind of homage to George and Barbara Bush as the kind of people that they were, the kind of friends that they were to people, the way that they welcomed people into their home. And so it became, it was a love letter to President and Mrs. Bush from this very loyal dedicated partner of theirs in the foundation, who knew them personally.
You could
Yes.
even say, and the community.
Yes.
Like it's a way that, yeah, there's a lot of things going on there that we were touching that we had to be very careful about. Hannah, do you want to read the brand heartbeat?
Yeah.
And what's
That
some
was-
context for what that is?
So this is just the thing that makes the brand go thump. You know, it's the thing that if this is right, everything's going to be right.
Right. And so kind of the common theme that we established, the main messaging point that we were going to use to clearly illustrate why it made sense for it to be called Daisy's Table was highlighting the commonalities between her and her husband John's character and the Bushes as well, in their hospitality and their friendship and their love of food and hosting. So that's what we were trying to encapsulate in this heartbeat, kind of articulating what that tie was and why it was a beautiful tribute. So I'll read that. There is something fundamentally true and good about George and Barbara Bush in their values. They also had a way of bringing together hospitality and true humility to make tables where all were welcome, where good taste in food met good taste in character, and where laughter was always woven throughout the conversation. The same is true of Daisy and John White. As such, there is no better place to display their story of friendship and service than around tables with friends and good food. Daisy's Cafe is a new, delightful platform that will use Daisy's friendship with George and Barbara to demonstrate their character in greater depth to visitors. This facet of the Bush legacy brings into starker relief their warmth, self-sacrifice, and loyalty, which we are devoted to remembering. Celebrating the values and stories of people like the Bushes and the Whites furthers the Foundation's commitment to developing the next generation of public servants.
That's good. Yeah, there's like a quiet, warm elegance to everything. And so the table and conversation over the table was going to be the driver for image selection, for everything that went into the design. And I think we got there
Yeah.
eventually.
And it was a neat opportunity to, like we noted in the heartbeat, kind of position the Bushes as just people of incredible character and depth of character and warmth in their personal lives too, because so much of the purpose of the museum is to shine light on on President Bush's professional career and also his life. But we really got to press in on his and Mrs. Bush's character just with their friends and at their home and with their family. And so it's an interesting contrast walking into that cavernous space in the pavilion and seeing the locomotive and the helicopter, and then walking over into what we were hoping would be like a warm, inviting space that feels distinctly different than kind of the reverence that the rest of the museum draws in. And so it was a neat thing, but also a challenge.
Yeah, and we actually talked more about that challenge when we were talking with Cole Interiors, and so that's a different episode that we'll make sure.
Yeah,
linked.
part 2.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
Our interior design partners.
I can't believe we've gotten this far in the conversation without mentioning Chef Tay, who is a local celebrity
Personality.
restaurateur acolyte. He's a force of nature. He's not just Chef Tay. He's like, today, right now, at this very moment, he could be either on a food truck or opening a new restaurant or setting some flambe on fire or talking to celebrities. I mean, he is just this huge personality here locally, and that's exactly who the foundation wanted to partner with for the restaurant. So he's the one, the brain behind all the cuisine. And the cuisine is based on some big themes out of the Bush's life, like their time at Kennebunkport and the president's very famous hatred of all things broccoli. So that was woven into the menu and the communication.
Some favorite family recipes are on the menu, and then we added our own little dash of panache by doing some renaming of some of the menu items. My favorite thing that we did was our renaming of the breakfast sandwiches.
Got pretty thematic there.
Yeah, we called them the Aviators, and they're supposed to kind of evoke this high calorie, high protein chow that Ensign George First Lieutenant Junior Grade George Bush would have eaten when he was a pilot in World War II on the Sand Jack aircraft carrier. So you got to go. We're not going to run them down here, but go over to Daisy's table and check them out one morning.
Yeah, that's some real deep dive stuff. Yeah,
We had a lot of fun.
So Chef Tay is putting together the menu. We're helping with the backstory on some of those items. We went into visual ID and our process, and we eventually landed on the logos and the icons and the little graphics that are a part of and decorate the space. We had full range of the library's archives for artifacts, for images. And then my favorite thing is that old image of the Stork Club, which you use the word serendipity. This was super strange. I had, as we've been looking through all of the photos.
So this is a photo of President and Mrs. Bush at an engagement party at the Stork Club, famous New York club in
late 1940s.
This would have been 1944.
Okay, so mid 40s, and black and white. George looks like a boy. I mean, very young man. They're in their
maybe
formal,
20.
Formal
21.
attire, and they're at the Stork Club. And I didn't know anything about the Stork Club, but the way I knew that it was the Stork Club was that there was the cigarette ashtray sitting there on the table, and so I did some research on it, and that is a fascinating deep dive on Wikipedia to go find out about the Stork Club. And then I had one of the things I do is I peruse old artifact sites that you can get your hands on, weird memorabilia and all sorts of
Just
things.
one of your hobbies.
It's one of the things.
The mark thing.
It's one of my favorite things about having access to the internet now is that I can go find things that they removed from like a Chicago school building, and I just love it. So anyway, I happened to be searching through, and there was the Stork Club cigarette ashtray with matchbooks. So we were able to snag that and put that in on the display glass.
We had that photo framed and presented it to them.
That's right. That was a lot of fun.
It's all one display together.
And not a replica Stork Club ashtray, but an actual
original.
Yeah, and the stories behind the Stork Club are like crazy. Humphrey Bogart got in a fight and had to be escorted out. Orson Welles, like all kinds of people.
One of Hemingway's favorite
Yep.
jaunts when he was in New York City.
So fun.
Didn't someone tip with a nice car at one point?
Yeah, there is a story about a car, and also what was famous was the owner of the club would send
Ray Billingsley.
There you go.
Billingsley.
There you go. Good memory. Would send these really extravagant and weird Christmas gifts to the people who had spent a ton of money at the Stork Club. So anyway, it's a fun dive.
Yeah, so it was fun to go off on all those different tangents and see where we could find meaning and dig through the archives and so many of the images and videos that they had in the archives were so fun to just pour over and learn more about just their lives as a whole. It was so
really
interesting in different media platforms. It was really neat.
And a thank you to Dr. Bob Holzweiss and his whole staff there at the George Bush Presidential Library.
They made it so easy.
Incredibly easy for us to go through the media,
Right.
the audio-visual holdings.
And I think a thing I want to mention that was special about this project is that we've done work with restaurants in the past, brand development work, but a lot of the time we set them up with all those different foundational pieces of brand that they need, but then we send them off into the world with it, and we don't really get any control over how it will play out in real life and what that looks like, especially from a visual standpoint. And we just kind of cross our fingers and hope that the vision,
Hope for the best.
Hope the vision lives out in the way that we hoped. But this was unique in that we got to be there for every step of the process. So from all the way from the very beginning, what is the brand going to sound like? What are we going to talk about? Who are we talking to? How does that feed into what it should look like? And how does that feed into how the space itself should feel? That was so unique that we got to speak into the design of the space itself, because that's such a huge part of that gut feeling of what a brand is. And we actually got to speak into that, which we rarely ever get to do.
I know it felt sort of luxurious. Josh Gamble, our lead designer, said this was his favorite project maybe ever, just because we had such free reign to craft as at will and to make recommendations, and they were so wonderful to work with. Daisy was a delight every step of the process.
Madison, I was just going to say, Madison and Daisy were so great they put so much trust in us. It was such an awesome feeling to be trusted to, yeah, you guys think this is going to look cool? Great.
Go for it. Yeah, and working with Chef Tay, we had worked years ago. We helped him when he launched his urban table concept. And so it was like being back around old friends. So that was really wonderful.
And we love the relational side of the project too, because one of the main themes of the brand as a whole was how hospitable Daisy and John White are, and we got to experience that firsthand when Daisy invited us over to her beautiful home in the historic district for a happy hour. And we said that the purpose was to go over some of her scrapbooks from her time knowing the Bushes, but I don't think we even touched them. We came in
she sent us home with them.
Yeah, that's right. It was our homework.
That's how much trust she put in us.
So much to talk about, just on a personal level. And Thaddeus made martinis, Daisy's favorite cocktail.
Vesper.
And we just sat around with her and John and told stories into the evening, and it was just
Maddie was
wonderful.
there too.
And Maddie was there, and
it was great.
It was just the perfect example of their character shining through and playing out in real life, and it was more serendipity.
Daisy's table, you saw it up close
we saw
and personal.
Her table in real life.
And then, kind of to piggyback on that, we can skip over the interior design piece because, like we said, we're going to have a part 2 where we talk with Zach Etheridge from Cole Office Interiors, who was the interior designer that we brought on board. But we got to attend the ribbon cutting event for the grand opening of the fully fleshed out Daisy's table. And that was just an absolute treat also, even though it came with a lot of scrambling. The 24, 48 hours beforehand. Talk a little bit about that, Mark.
Well, we were just, the way that the banquet table structure came into the space, I mean, we had a very compressed timeline on this project, from first engagement till it has to open on this date at this time, because there's going to be people showing up and expecting to have food and it all to look right, including High Point, who put in the signage. Like, it was involved. And so the orchestration of all of that was, we were moving very fast.
And we were placing objects into the display cabinet.
Yeah, hours before people showed up. So it was kind of a madness, but it was a great madness.
But I think that is kind of the nature of the beast. You little
we gotta
details
scramble.
like that last artifact that just completes the look to make it feel full. The objects in the entryway.
Yeah, it was.
You kind of can't do that stuff other than right before sometimes.
Right, and Daisy, of course, was in there giving her 2 cents on where things should go, and
which
it
was
turned
great.
out beautiful. Yes, it was great. And can I say one of my favorite parts from the grand opening? One of my favorite parts of brand development as a whole is the translation that happens, where clients come in with all these thoughts and ideas that they can't quite articulate in the way that they want to, and they pass them over to us, and we grab them and massage them and really, really, really whittle them down into a clear message. And that is so empowering to give back to people, to be able to speak about themselves. That's just one of the main values of the brand workshop and brand development itself. And so I could get emotional about that because it's just really empowering. And so getting to see that played out whenever in one of the speeches, Maddie just got to read one of the write-ups that we wrote about, I think it was the mission statement of what Daisy's Table is all about, and just read it word for word because it just resonated so deeply, and it was right. And we just got to play a pivotal role in them telling the story of what the brand was, and have that shared on a grand scale was just beautiful.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I think every client comes to us with something deep in their heart. They have something deep. And so that's part of our job, is to draw that out, and for us to be able to make a thing that they couldn't put words to, or they couldn't imagine visually expressing, to see it come to life, and to be something that you can hold in your hands and point to and take a picture next to. It's not magic. It's not even alchemy, but there is something that touches a thing I can't explain. And that is the fun part about brand development work. And when that works well, it makes all the difference.
Right.
I don't think that there's really much better words to probably close out on. That
Yep,
was
that
a
sounds-
beautiful peroration.
Cool.
It was a good one.
All right. Well, thank you, team. This was fun.
Yeah, thanks for joining us on this episode of The Deep Dark.
On to the next one.